but when you're a first-class noticer, you're absorbed in where the other person is, where they're coming from. Their hyperbole, increased inflection, adjectives or adverbs all have emotional juice on them. For you to distinguish yourself as a salesperson is get them to open up more to you than their competition.
Hello Sales Nation, I am Will Barron, host of the Salesman Podcast, and today's episode is a special one. We have, and I don't want to diminish any of this, but we have Mark Goulston, who is a business advisor, consultant, a speaker, similar to many of the guests we have on the show. This is where it gets absolutely fascinating to me. He is an FBI and police hostage negotiation trainer, and he's a fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. Essentially, he's a doctor. And with this pool of knowledge and talents that Mark has, we had a really interesting conversation of how you break through to prospects that seemingly are interested. So to add a bit of context to this, you make the phone call, the prospect is super excited, perhaps you go and see them and you email back and forth and you're dead excited, both motivated, it's a surefire deal, and you get into the sales meeting, the prospect's sat in front of you a bit more like this, and if you're watching on YouTube you'll see my body language of swinging around in my chair and the voice is getting monotone and they don't really want you to be there. But they've been excited beforehand, so you're trying to suss out what's going on, and Mark explains how to break through and grab them, shake them a little bit, and have the conversation and drive that motivation and action that you thought was there beforehand. You can find out more about Mark over at markgoulston.com. All these books, everything else that we talk about is available in the show notes over at salesman.red. And with that, let's jump into today's episode. Hey Mark, and welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Glad to be with you across the pond there.
Good stuff. I'm excited to have you on the show. And I want to start by painting a little bit of a picture for you. So a lot of the salespeople listening, and myself and yourself as well, we've all been in this situation, whether it's in sales or just in family life or your personal life. It kind of floats across both ponds here. So you're sat there, you're speaking with a prospect, you know your product or service is going to potentially help them massively, and you genuinely believe that. However, they are not listening to you, that you can't get through to them, it's difficult to break in. I think the phrase that I probably would use, and I think this translates over to you guys in the States as well, is of, it's like talking to a brick wall. Hopefully I know the answer to the question I'm just about to ask, otherwise it's going to be a very short interview, Mark. But is it possible to break down these barriers, and when someone's adamant or nearly adamant that they don't want to engage, is it possible to engage with them through techniques or tactics?
Yeah, absolutely. There's something that my late mentor, a fellow named Warren Bennis, a big guru in leadership, taught me and directed me. And I would direct this towards every salesperson because many of them don't do a very good job of it. And what Warren said was, be a first-class noticer. Because when you notice things, it's different than seeing, watching, or looking, because then you're kind of an observer. But when you're a first-class noticer, you're absorbed in where the other person is, where they're coming from. So since this is a video interview, I'm noticing that you're writing this down. You might have actually written down, be a first-class noticer, because something about it tickled your fancy. So I'm kind of noticing that you took action, which means if you're taking action on something I'm saying, it means I'm in your head somewhere. So you want to be a first-class noticer. And to your question, and kick me to the curb because I do get a little tangential. You're going to notice that about
me. That's what we like, but I will inject. Don't worry about that if we need to.
And I need all the help in that department that I can get. But there's something that I talk about in my books, Just Listen, and Talking to Crazy. And the most recent one, Talking to Crazy, is about how do you deal with irrational or impossible people. And the secret, or the key in Talking to Crazy, is you lean into their negativity, and instead of getting defensive about it, you actually, in this case, may articulate it for them. So something that I once did with a prospect, but I tend to be a little bit bold and verging on crazy, if you ask my wife. I remember I was with this prospect, and the last thing he wanted to do was be there with me. And so I looked at him and I said, do me a favor. And he said, what? I said, cross your arms and look up at the ceiling. He said, what? I said, trust me on this. Cross your arms and look up at the ceiling. And so he went along with it. And even just that is breaking the usual dance. And it goes like this. And I said, great. Now you're in sync with what you're thinking. And you know something? I don't like being sold to either. And he laughed. And he laughed because what happened is I was able to bring out into the conversation the negativity that he was already feeling. And he laughed because instead of getting defensive, I was playful. We got it out in the open. And he kind of laughed with, you got me. And then after that, I was able to say, given that we're here together, given that we're sort of stuck with each other, I can put you in touch with products and services or other resources that can help you with any challenge or situation that you might be facing now. And I love making introductions and referrals to other people. So can you talk to me? Talk to me about, and sometimes I'll say, do a SWOT analysis. What would help me is to do a SWOT analysis on you, your company, anything. And the SWOT is, what do you think some of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are? And again, I don't know that you go directly into that, but these are just some tips of things you can put into the conversation.
Mark, let me go one step further back just for a split second. Is this something that just and you've got plenty of experience in this with your past, your background, the amount of books and content that you produced on the subject matter. Are these conversations something that just happens naturally and all salespeople and all business people have to deal with them? Or again, taking that step back, if you're in a conversation like this, is this purely your fault in the first place that you haven't either qualified the prospect well enough so they're not interested, or is it your responsibility to not be in this situation in the first place? Or does it happen even to the best of us?
Those are excellent points, and that was very good focusing me. Give yourself a gold star there. I think a lot of salespeople waste their time by not qualifying the prospect. And what you want to do to the best of your ability is make sure that they have a need, or they have a problem, or they have something that your product or a service can solve. So sometimes actually when I'm meeting someone, and I pre-qualified them, but part of that is I have books and people are reaching out to me. You reached out to me. And something I might say, because I already have a little bit of their interest towards me or what I'm about, and I might say to them, to help this be better for both of us, why are we meeting today? Why are you meeting with me, and why now? And I think if you do a little bit of pre-qualifying, you could probably say that, and they might be taken aback because it seems confrontational. And they might say, "What?" You could say, "Yeah, unless you're just being polite, or you said you'd follow up with me, and you couldn't get out of it. We're meeting, and I'd like to know why we're meeting today. Why me? Why now? And tell me about that." Now, again, depending on how prepared they are, because it's amazing how unprepared people are when they go from meeting to meeting to meeting. I mean, you try to be prepared, but we're all juggling all these different meetings in our lives, and often we're not as well prepared and as centered as we'd like to be. And so sometimes they may look at you, and when they made the appointment, they had a reason to meet with you, but now they don't even know why they're meeting with you. And they might even, and if they're a little awkward, you could say, "Let me see if this can help your memory. What my company, what I do, these are the services and products we have, and these are the problems that we solve for companies and individuals. Does that help, jar your memory about why we might be meeting?"
And the reason I asked that, Mark, and you've gone through it perfectly there, in that I've met with people, they've been super excited, and in the medical device days, it'd be a surgeon perhaps, and then the hour before I've met with them, perhaps they've had a horrific surgery, loads of things have gone wrong. So then they've gone from literally 2 hours ago, we're super excited to be talking to you about new endoscopes and products and the toys that they use every day, which they love talking about and experimenting with new models and techniques. So then an hour later, they don't want you to be there, but they're feeling kind of obligated and they're being polite. So I've sat down with these surgeons. There's a stereotype, of course, but whether it's a man or a woman, they're quite alpha-natured, and they're sat there and they're kind of how you described before, arms crossed, just waiting for you to say your pitch so then you can leave. Other than the questioning techniques you described then, are there any other ways to break through that initial kind of, I don't know how to describe it, other than you've got this thick crust of the person withdrawing and holding back and thinking about themselves? How do you get them to break through that so then you can just have the normal conversation that you were planning on having previously?
Well, let me give you a little anecdote because people remember stories. And I remember and this is in, I think, my book, Just Listen. I was there in front of a CEO, and it was difficult to get an appointment with him. And there I am in front of him, and he's exactly what you're saying. He's preoccupied. Now, I tend to be a little bit bold. And boldness without being brazen grabs people's attention. And this probably came off as brazen to him. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey, how much time you got for me?" And he went like this. And that look was, "I think you're about done." And he said, "What?" I said, "See how much time you got for me." And he's flustering, and I know he's going to throw something at me. And I said, "Look, we're into minute 2. And I think what we're going to talk about is worth your undivided attention, and you can't give it to me because there's something more important on your mind, or you changed your mind about seeing me, or something else. And here's the deal. I'm going to give you the gift of the remaining," he had 20 minutes for me, "the remaining 16 minutes. But here's the deal. Take care of whatever's on your mind so you're not dragging it through the day and having it be this big shadow over you." Now, I'm a shrink. I'm a psychiatrist, and he started to tear up, and he was like a big footballer. And I said to myself, "Mark, you promised yourself you wouldn't make people cry in the business world." And I said, "What?" And he looks at me, totally now uncrossed arms, and he said, "You've known me for 2.5 minutes, and you know something that people 30 yards away from me don't know because I'm private. My wife's having a biopsy, and it doesn't look good. And so I'm really not here." And then I immediately switched to being compassionate, and I said, "Look, you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be with me. You shouldn't even be at work. Go make a call. Go be with her. This can keep. You can't give me your undivided attention." But what was interesting is he kind of shook himself like this, like a big Newfoundland dog coming in out of the rain, and he said, "My wife's stronger than me, and she said go to work. And I'm not as strong as her, but I'm pretty strong. I served 2 tours in Vietnam, and you've got my undivided attention, and you've got your full 20 minutes." So what happened there? Now, I don't know what the takeaway is, but what you can say as a salesperson is you can point out to them. And using the example you use, you can say, "I noticed that a couple hours ago, you seemed enthused to talk to me. And right now, the last thing you want to do is talk to me. And why don't we arrange for a better time? Because I think when you were excited, you saw some possibility, some opportunity. And I don't know what's happened in the last 2 hours, but rather than us meeting, take care of whatever happened. Don't have it hang over your head. And if you're still interested, we'll reschedule that."
So there's a weird dynamic going on here, Mark, and we'll dive into that. But before and the weird dynamic I'll explain it while I've gone down that route of you're being bold to grab attention, but then immediately you're pulling away from that and being compassionate. And from a psychology perspective, there's probably loads of terminology to describe all this. And so I appreciate you using anecdotes to explain it so that we can all understand it. But are you, by doing things like that, are you trying to shock them a little bit and then show that you care and that you're there for them in the moment? Because that works both clearly in the anecdote you just give in business, but that's how I deal with. So I don't like talking about my girlfriend on the show, but she's a doctor. Of course, she has difficult things to work through. Perhaps very rarely, if something's gone wrong in work. So I'll do the same thing of snap to grab attention, do something daft, usually make her giggle a little bit, and then we can talk about it, and it pulls her out of the moment. So is that what we're attempting to do here in being bold, grabbing the attention, and then almost grabbing it and then switching it with something else immediately?
Well, I live to be of service. I don't live to sell, but I sell a lot because I live to be of service. And I'm very well connected to some of the top CEOs in the world because I never sell them on anything. My whole goal is to be of service to them in any way possible and have them actually discover that I'm not trying to sell them on anything other than building a relationship with them that's different than their relationship with everyone who's trying to sell them on things. And so I think what's bold is actually caring about what matters to the person you're with and not just saying it in words, but saying it in action. So what I did that may seem bold, but to me as a former hostage negotiator and a suicide interventionist, to me it wasn't bold at all. What I did is I noticed that there was something more important going on with them than whatever I had to speak to them about, and I addressed what was important to them and suggested they take care of it. So the boldness, if I was a salesperson, is that my sales manager could be killing me. You did what? Why didn't you close them? How much time did you waste on that? And to be honest, if I have a sales manager like that, I'd move to another company.
So are we all on the stereotype of the salesperson then? And perhaps even I, having you on the show, in the initial few sentences that I give you and setting that picture of, I was asking you of tips and tricks and tactics and hacks to get the other person to turn around and change their perspective and to welcome you. Is that the wrong way to look at it? Should we, the salesperson, be looking internally? And I think what I'm getting at here is it's surely very, very difficult to be rude, to put up a wall to someone when you know they're just trying to help. So is that the angle we should be trying to take?
Well, I think if your angle is always to be of service, and what'll happen is people will lean into you being there to be of service. If you're there to sell them, people will lean away from you. So let me give you an example in real time of being service to you and see what happens inside you right now. You mentioned something about your girlfriend. She's a doctor, and sometimes she's had a bad day, and you're trying to help her have a better day. And so here's a tip that you can take to the bank, and you won't have to sleep in the bedroom tonight because you won't blow it. What you really want to do when she's having a bad day is you want to go in there and enable her to get things off her chest so that she can feel better and less alone in her frustration, which means don't give her any advice or a solution unless she asks for it. Your goal is to, now I can use the metaphor because she's a doctor, is she has an abscess that formed because of her bad day, and your goal is to go in there to drain it, not to put a suture on it with a solution that she doesn't want and doesn't need. And so if she's like that, what you might want to do is you might want to look her in the eye in a loving way and say, honey, let's get to it. What was the absolute worst thing that happened to you today? And what made it the worst thing? And what had happened? What did you think of doing? What did you do? What happened next? What did that feel like? Something that I call FTD delivery. Now in the States, FTD refers to florists. But what FTD to me means is feelings, thoughts, and what'd you do? And when you can elicit from another person, say with your girlfriend, what happened? What'd you think? What'd you do? What'd you feel after that? What'd you do next? What'd you think? And what'll happen is when you can elicit from the other person their feelings, their thoughts, and their actions, they're going to feel known and understood by you, sometimes better than anyone in their life. And when I've utilized the FTD approach, and actually what I usually use with people is what I call the TDF approach, which because most people stay away from feelings because they're guarded, they don't trust you. And so what I'll say to people when something happened is I'll say, what'd you think when that happened? Like I could say to you, so what'd you think when your girlfriend said, I think I have to quit the medical profession? I think it's just too hard for me. And so if you were to say to her, well, say more. What made you think that? Well, blah, 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 blah. Well, what did you do? Well, I didn't do anything really crazy or self-destructive. I made it through the day, but I don't know if I can keep doing this. So what did you feel? I don't know. I felt this is too much.
And how deep do these layers do you have to peel off? Because this is my logical mind coming in, because I'm a bloke. I'm probably not as good with the thoughts and feelings and aspect of all this from reading them in the conversation that we're having. Are you just trying to peel off these layers until you get to a point where the other person just is, you can see relief in them, that they go, oh, I feel better now? Is that the goal that we're aiming for with this?
Well, what's going to happen with your girlfriend, because you're a bloke, because you're British, and this could score you big points.
I'm making notes, Mark. I'm making notes here.
You better be making notes. Is what'll happen, especially if you're making eye contact and you look into her eyes, you're going to see her eyes soften. You're going to see gratitude in her eyes. And she may even say, Will, thank you for just listening. And you may think to yourself, because you're a bloke, geez, I didn't do anything. I didn't solve anything. I don't think I did anything great. And part of what you did is you helped her to get her frustration or angst off her chest. She felt relieved. She felt less alone. She felt calmer. And you did it without advice or a solution, which if she didn't want it would probably make her feel more ticked off at you.
Yeah. And let's dive into the point a little bit further, and then I've got something else I want to ask you as well that will sum all of this up. Is this different for men and women? Because I know if I was sat in a room with some other bloke, and they weren't trained in all of this as you are, and it makes total sense when you say it. But if someone was asking me what was going on in my personal life outside of business, and I wasn't comfortable sharing it with them, and they kept persisting, and they were trying, I could see they were trying to help, but that would frustrate me more. Is that I would want the solution. My logical brain would say, well, just give me the answer. I don't want to play these games. Is there a difference then between if you're doing this with a man and a woman of how they share their emotions and how deep you should go with it all?
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm actually talking about is masculine energy and feminine energy. Yeah. And there are some men who show a feminine energy, and I'm not talking about necessarily people who are gay, but there's a feminine energy. Yeah. And there are some women, especially ones who seem to run for president in the United States, who too much show a masculine energy. And the difference is, and this hopefully you don't have to take notes on, but you're going to watch this, as will your viewers. Masculine energy is when something is coming at you, you think about it, and then you go to what to do about it, and you don't want to feel about it. So blokes like to think, then do, but don't ask them to feel anything. Yeah. Now they can get emotional if their team is losing, but don't ask them to feel anything. Feminine energy is they feel and then they do, but don't ask them to think anything. And it doesn't mean that that's wrong, that you're dealing with a feel-doer, because my wife can be a feel-doer, and she has a sixth sense. And when our children were young, she knew exactly what our kids were doing 3 rooms away. Oh, they turned over, probably going to be hungry in 10 minutes. I said, what? How do you know that? So there is a place for feel-do energy. So here's the takeaway. If you're in a conflict with someone, there's a good chance that you're either feel do going up against think do,
Yeah.
or think do going up against feel do. Now, I seem to be able to, I think I've been influential because I'm like a Prius. I seamlessly cross over from feel doing to think doing. So I can do think do to deal with blokes like you, but I can do feel doing with women or people coming from that other end without coming off as robotic
Mhm.
and too analytical. So I can switch, and that helped as a hostage negotiation trainer. And so here's a deal that I hope probably be the best takeaway from our interview. If you're in conflict with someone, just pause and note to yourself, I'm in a conflict. And in all likelihood, you're either a feel doer going up against a think doer, or you're a think doer going up against the feel doer. Now, if you're a think doer going up against the feel doer, this is what you do. You recognize I'm in a conflict. I'm in a think do mindset. I'm probably going up against the feel doer. And this is exactly what you do. You say to the other person, you could say, hey, and you have to say it with this tone. You can't whine. You can't complain. You say, hey, I want to try something that I think can get us out of this, or get us through this. So you just say it sort of with the assumptive close. Salespeople know about that. You just make a statement. Hey, there's something I want to try that I think will get us through this. And then you look them straight in the eye. And if you're a think doer dealing with a feel doer, what you say to the feel doer, say to me, repeat after me, and lean into it if it feels right. So if I'm dealing with a feel doer, I might say to them, or say to her, if that's the case, say to me, Mark, I hate it when you try to analyze me. I hate it when you give me solutions. It makes me crazy. And they're going to look at you and they're going to say, what? You could say, no, just, say it, or make up your own words. And they're going to start to laugh, because what you're doing is something we call mediated catharsis, meaning you're enabling them to get stuff off their chest, but you're mediating it so you don't get defensive. And what will happen is you lean into it, you have them lean into it, and you will watch them lift. They'll start to laugh because they got it off their chest without you being defensive. Now, if you're a feel doer dealing with a think doer, you say the same thing. Hey, I want to try something that I think will get us through this. And the think doer is more of a bloke saying, what do you have? And you look at him right in the eye and say this to me, and see if it feels right. Now, you can't ever tell a think doer that they hate anything, because they're so out of touch with their feelings. Hate is too strong for them. But you can use the word frustrated. So if you're a feel doer dealing with a think doer, what you say to the think doer is say this to me. So if I'm the feel doer talking to a think doer, what I might say to them is, say to me, it really frustrates me when you get emotional about things. When you get emotional about things, it feels like the whole thing's going to just go off the reservation. Drives me crazy. And so, and then you say, repeat that after me and see if you can, relate to it. And even they will start to lighten up, because what you're doing is you're giving them a verbal catharsis, giving them the right language, taking charge of the conversation without being controlling or judgmental. They lean into it. They get it off their chest. They feel better. And trust me, you're going to be different than all the competition.
I love
anywhere.
I love what you're saying, because it's so practical, and the way you're describing it, I can visualize loads of places where it can be used, and places where I could have perhaps used it in the past as well. And Mark, I've got a final question to wrap up this bit of the show, and hopefully this will give some insights to sales and the professionals listening as to when and where they should be using everything that we talked about. Because should we be using techniques like this just generally when we meet with prospects, just to build rapport with them, even if they're not being defensive? Or is this only usable when they do have that barrier up?
I think you should use it with everyone. One of the ironic things that I've discovered is when you're a first-class noticer and then you ask people questions about that, and something else that we haven't talked about, but I got to squeeze it in because it's valuable. In my book, Just Listen and Talking to Crazy, I talk about conversation deepeners. And so when you're interacting with people, notice hyperbole, which is words like awful, terrible, amazing, incredible, that's hyperbole, or inflection. Got to do something about this. Their voice goes up or down. Notice adjectives, which is a way of their embellishing a noun. Notice adverbs, because it's a way of their embellishing a verb. So their hyperbole, increased inflection, adjectives or adverbs all have emotional juice on them. And so notice those things. And after they say those things, as you're noticing them, they may say, what do you think? And what I think is better for you to distinguish yourself as a salesperson is get them to open up more to you than their competition. So if they say, this is an amazing opportunity, and they say, what do you think? You say, I could tell you what I think, but say more. That's the conversation deepener. Say more about the amazing opportunity. And what will happen is if you're with them one-to-one, they're going to start raising their hands because of their emotion. They're going to say, oh yeah, this is an amazing opportunity. If we could only do this, we'd be really successful. And then let them finish. And another conversation deepener after they finish it is to go, really? With an inviting thing, really? And what's going to happen is their hands are going to go even up further. Oh yeah, if we do this, we're going to have an IPO this year. This is amazing. But as you see that, as they're going like this, you're opening them up to talk much more about things and be more invested in the conversation than they'll be with your competition. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. You're half stroking their ego, and you're half, because everyone likes to be in that excited state. So you're half like tickling that and lead them towards it. It's brilliant. I enjoy that.
Yeah, but it was something you and I have to talk about online, because if you say you're tickling their ego, that means you're too transactional, Will. Because to me, it's opening people up to hearing what really matters to them and then being of service.
So let me just interject there. Is that the difference between someone who does this seamlessly and is super charismatic versus someone who is perhaps learning the trade and is just trying to improve themselves? Is that the point of mastery when it doesn't seem transitional because it's not, you genuinely care?
Okay, so here's the deal, and I spoke about this in Just Listen. I remember I was having a lunch with a young man in his late 30s and a young woman, and he asked her all these wonderful questions, where'd you go to college and whatever, and I took him aside afterwards, and I said, some of those questions were great, but do yourself a favor. When you ask questions like that, care about the answer. Because I speak to billionaires, you don't. And I can tell you, the more successful people are, the more discerning they are, and the more they'll be able to detect a technique that you don't care about. And so if you're going to ask questions besides being, selling your item, care about the answer. And so the problem is if you're new, and I don't mean to be upsetting to people who are new, who are listening to this or watching this, they're saying, yeah, but I just have to cross all the T's and dot all the I's. I mean, in my presentation, I got to make sure that I don't leave anything out. And so, yes, learn all those things until you really understand your product, what it does, what problems it solves, what solutions it provides. Yes, you have to go through that painful period. But then after that, when you really understand its value, really start to listen into where the other person's coming from and what they really need and truly need, and you might need to pull that out of them.
Brilliant. And I'll wrap this part of the show up with this anecdote, Mark, in that I've not spoken to any billionaires yet, but I have, and I'm forcing myself to interact more with the multimillionaires that live around where I do, and of course I have successful people on the show like yourself who are having these interactions daily. And something I've picked up and noticed from the 140 odd episodes I think we've done with the show now, and the engagements that I'm having out of the show and the opportunities that are being placed in front of me, is that these super successful people are all, when you're with them, they're super focused in the moment, and it's almost intense to a certain extent. And yeah, how you just described that, you feel like you want to open up to them. And so you've given us a bunch of things to think about here. But I think the main takeaway from the show is if you just care about the conversation and you care about the success of the person that you're dealing with, a lot of it will just flow naturally across to the other person, right? Yeah,
my late mentor, Warren Bennis, had a couple phrases that I try to follow, but I fail at. He said, be more interested than interesting. Be more fascinated than fascinating. And one of my favorite phrases he said is, boredom occurs when I fail to make the other person interesting. That's real presence.
Mark, with that, I know I'll end it on that note. I've got a couple of questions to ask everyone that comes on the show.
Sure.
The first one, and we'll fly through these. Who is the world's greatest salesperson?
Well, this is the wrong answer, but I'm giving it to you. To me, the greatest salesperson was Nelson Mandela. And what he sold is it's possible to have a leader that you can trust, have confidence in, and will never hurt you and is going to help you. And that's not sales, that's inspiration. But you're talking to more of an inspirational guy than a sales trainer here.
Love it. Okay, next one. And going deeper, and I'm sure you'll be able to do this. I'm certain you'll be able to do this, but going deeper than I enjoy putting a smile on my clients' faces or enjoy, helping people. What motivates you to close deals, and whether that be the client work or the writing the books or whatever it is? What really drives you at the bottom of it all?
Well, something that I've actually learned by being a suicide interventionist and a hostage negotiation trainer is I've learned to look into people's eyes deeply with a look that basically says, tell me what most matters to you. Tell me what's really going on. And I come from a position where I never hurt people. I never take advantage of people. I never manipulate them. And so that allows me to look into their eyes. And what happens is they reveal things they never would have revealed. And often when they reveal those things, it turns a transaction into a lifelong relationship. And then along the way, since I'm always being of service, and here's how, by the way, I deal with those relationships. And I make sales, and I make sales for other people. I email those people, these billionaires, and I say, as part of my honoring our relationship, I can occasionally introduce you to people that I think are excellent. They're consistently better than very good. Now, I have not told this person that I'm going to be speaking to you on their behalf, but I found another excellent person, and if you want an introduction, I can make that happen. I make an introduction a day.
And is that a set, focused goal that you have for yourself?
I think it really comes from, I didn't have the happiest of childhoods. And so every day I want to connect people because I felt growing up that in our family, people could have been better connected. And I felt it as a pain. And so when I can connect people with other people to make their lives better in any way, it's a calling. I have no control over it. I just have to do it every day.
Good. I like other people have said similar things on the show, but the way you're and the language you're using of calling and I can see you shrugging your shoulders, and there's no, it seems that there's no layer beneath that. I really appreciate that kind of response, Mark. And I've got one final question for you. It's something I've asked everyone who's come on the show so far. If you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at sales?
Well, what I would say to my inner self is go easy on yourself. Because every day I have what I call Schindler moments from the movie Schindler's List. Every day I always feel like I could have done more. I could have done better. And it's interesting, this mentor of mine who passed away, he was one of the world's authorities on leadership. And before he died, a couple of years before he died, he said, leaders in the world are worse than ever. I'm a global expert on this. Maybe I didn't do a good job. And so, I know he changed my life. And so I'm carrying the torch for him, and I'm building a big global leadership collective, collecting people just like him, who are islands of goodness. And they function in their communities, but the sea of selfishness is drowning them. And so I'm pulling them all together to change the world.
And final question, just leading on from that. Is this a natural thing that all just human beings, everyone on the planet has, this feeling of, I could have done more, even though you perhaps could have done more in hindsight. And of course, you don't have hindsight in the moment. And the reason I ask that is I'm really passionate about salespeople getting mentors to talk them through and to encourage them and motivate them through these kind of things. So the two-part question, is this a natural state that everyone finds themselves in, if not all the time, some of the time? And is the best way to get around it to have a mentor?
Mentors changed my life. I've had 6, they've all died, and I mentor about 25 people around the world. And mentors can not only help you be successful. One of the best things about my mentors is they enjoyed me. And they didn't enjoy me for what I did. They seemed to enjoy me. And so it healed something in me. And one of the things that I tell other mentors is you may help people be more successful, but a lot of people didn't come from the happiest of childhoods. And if you can actually be happy to see them instead of just focused on sales or what they're doing, you can heal them, make them whole, and they'll be much more secure when they do their sales call as opposed to insecure and having the insecure kill the sale.
I love it. And that's for any sales management listening who are hammering their sales teams daily and shouting at them. There's probably a conversation for another time, but there's a coaching element of sales management, which I've only ever had from one sales manager. He made a massive difference to what I was doing. We'll end on that, Mark. And with that, I want you to tell us a little bit about the books and also where we can find out just more about you in general.
Well, thank you. Well, about me in general, if you go at Mark Goulston, MarkGoulston, you'll find me at Twitter. If you're interested in kind of what I'm about and various things that I'm doing, I co-host an NPR show. I co-host an urban black radio show. I blog for Harvard Business, Huffington Post. I have a syndicated column at something called Biz Journals, which goes to 43 cities. But if you go to markgoulston.com, MarkGoulston.com, you'll find that. And if I'm recommending my books, my first one, Get Out of Your Own Way, seems to have done very well after 20 years, so check that out. But Just Listen became the top book on listening in the world. It's about how do you listen into people. And my recent book, Talking to Crazy, just missed out on winning the Audible Book Oscar for Business and Personal Development. And Oprah excerpted it. And that's about how do you lean into people to calm them down, get them to listen to reason, and maybe close a sale.
Fantastic. We'll link to all that in the show notes over at salesman.red for anyone who is on a treadmill or in the car trying to scribble things down on their hands or a bit of paper at the moment. It'll all be over there. And Mark, with that, I've got a lot out of this episode. I really appreciate your time and your being candid with some of your answers. I really appreciate that. And I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
It's been, I've been delighted, and I'm actually working with a wonderful woman in London who sold her, she has a family business training program. And so I hope to visit her. And if I do, I'm going to visit you.
And there we have it, Mark. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for your time. I really enjoyed our conversation. I feel like I personally could get a lot more out of just chatting with you on the show. And so hopefully that resonates with the audience and they're getting a lot out of these conversations as well. We'll have you back on anytime. Mark, thank you. Sales Nation, the audience, you listening in your car right now or on the treadmill, I massively appreciate your attention. And with that, I'll speak with you all again tomorrow.